I used to be a columnist, and I was touring with a book. It was a collection of Nation columns, and a reporter in Boston asked me to describe the Nation for his readers who might not be familiar with it. And I said, Pinko. It's a Pinko magazine. And he said, surely you have more to say about it than that. And he said, yes, it's a Pinko magazine printed on very cheap paper. It's the sort of magazine that if you make a Xerox copy of your article, the copy is a lot better than the original. I sometimes used to say in speeches when people asked me to go further in describing it, that the subscriptions at that time, the circulation was 200 libraries and 8 unreconstructed old Trotskyites. After a panel at one of the Nation cruises, the cruises I call lefties at sea, one of the panelists afterwards, I mentioned that, and one of the panelists afterwards pulled me aside and in sort of a consular way said that the Trotskyites didn't read the Nation. And I said, well, who were those old guys who come up to me after a speech and say, I'm one of the 8 unreconstructed Trotskyites? I was recruited, if that's the word, to write for the Nation by the former editor, Victor Navasky, or as I refer to him as the wily and parsimonious Victor S. Navasky. And I talked a lot about his original offer when I asked him how much he was going to pay for each column. He said something in the high 2 figures. I turned this over to my high-powered literary agent, and I said, play hardball. He got him up to 100. After a few weeks, the wily and parsimonious Victor S. Navasky came to me and said, what about these quotes? And I said, what quotes are you talking about? And he said, did John Foster Dulles really say you can't fool all the people all the time? You might as well give it your best shot. I said, Victor, at these rates you can't expect real quotes. After a while, I quit writing the column and started writing a poem or a piece of verse for every issue. Well, not every issue. I mean, every issue, but not every week, because as I pointed out in one of the columns, the Nation publishes only every other week in the summer, even though the downtrodden are oppressed every day of the year. But what happened was that I was very interested in John Sununu, the chief of staff of George H.W. Bush, who sort of stood out from that group of Ivy League Protestants. He wasn't even shaped like the rest of them. And he had that aspect of personality that attracts those of us in the small joke trade. He was very interested in proving he was the smartest guy in the room. Plus, he had that beautiful name, Sununu, which I found very hilarious. We used to mumble it on the subway, Sununu. And finally, I wrote a poem called If You Knew What Sununu Knew. And I sent it to the Nation, and the wily and parsimonious suggested that I write one every week. So naturally, I asked about the pay, and he said, we pay you the same as we pay for a column, $100. Even though it's shorter, poems are shorter than columns. And I didn't think it was much, but then I checked with the poetry editors around, and it turns out that poetry in this country is usually paid for by the line. And at that time, the highest payer was the New Yorker, $10 a line. Do the math, you can see why there's not a huge crowd in front of the poetry booth at the career day fair. And I was going to get $100 no matter how long the poem was. So all I had to do to be the highest paid poet in the country was write a 2-line poem. For instance, when Lloyd Benson, the former Texas senator, was named Secretary of Treasury, I wrote a poem about his relations with special interest groups. The man is known for, quote, thorough quidness. In Texas, that's how folks do business. $50 a line. And Quayle, I kept doing this because of the buzz you get for working at the absolute top dollar. I wrote a poem with George W. Bush's during the primary campaign when his college transcript was leaked to no apparent effect on the campaign. Was obliviously on he sails, with marks not quite as good as Quayle. $50 a line. Sometimes ask if politicians write letters of complaint about my poetry, and it's, well, they wouldn't really admit that they read it, I don't think. And also, it's too silly to complain about it. For instance, in 2008, I wrote a poem about Mitt Romney called Mitt as Doll. It was, yes, Mitt's so smooth of speech and smooth of garb, he reminds us all of Ken and Barbie, so quick to shed his moderate regalia, he may, like Ken, be lacking genitalia. Well, the press secretary is not going to write me the Nation and say, the government does have genitalia. I mentioned the lefties at sea cruises, and I want you to know that those panels are somewhat different from what I assume this panel will be, because in normal panels, and I'm sure a lot of you have been on panels, you call for questions after the panel, and there's a hesitancy, and then maybe 1 or 2 hands go up. In the Nation cruise, 2/3 of the hands go up, and none of the questions are faintly interrogatory. I assume that won't happen today. Meanwhile, enjoy the panel. And may I say, introduce the current editor of the Nation, who is not known as the Lowry Apostle of this computer